Welcome to A Call to Healing. I'm your host, Melanie McDaniel. Today's guest is Dr. Jasdeep Sandhu, an integrative psychiatrist who weaves together mind, spirit, nature, sound, and frequency in her work. Jasdeep guides her patients toward deep self-inquiry through yoga, somatic work, and ketamine therapy. A Call to Healing is sponsored by Senavita, a platform helping practitioners spend more time in service and less time in the back office. This conversation was potent, so let's dive in. Hello, Jasdeep, my sister. Welcome to A Call to Healing.
Hi, Melanie. Good to see you.
You too. So to get started, let's get a little bit of information about you, where you came from, whatever you want to share leading up to being Dr. Jasdeep.
Sure. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this yesterday because I was like, oh, this is, they always want to know your story. And I'm also really moving into this phase of like, do we need to know everybody's story all the time? And just even for like a minute to be like, what's really present right now, right? And like, who are we in this moment? Instead of sort of carrying all this stuff from the past. And while we need those experiences and obviously they shape who we are, I find it very refreshing to sometimes just be like, oh, this is who I am right now. And that was really highlighted when I'm in Mexico City. I moved here 2 years ago and nobody knew who I was and nobody asks what you do. And so I would just show up and be like, hi, I'm just Steve. And they're like, do you like it here? And I'm like, I love it here. I'm doing great. Like, and it was like super, super present. And then also because my Spanish is not that great, like I couldn't speak in past tense. So everything just felt very like, and it still does feel like that. I'm like, oh, like this is who I am right now. Like right now, I know Melanie, I feel connected to you. My like heart feels open. I feel joyful, even though I was kind of stressed out like 5 minutes ago. Um, and so I'm bringing sort of presence to this. And I invite everybody to do the same, sort of just whoever's listening, just to like, who are you right now and who do you want to sort of show up as right now? Yeah. And so I can share about myself. So I practice medicine. I'm an integrative psychiatrist, and for me that means just sort of integrating mind, body, spirit, nature, sound, frequency, biology, chemistry, everything, physics into the way I care for people and really get them to tap into their own healing potential. And so that's sort of what I do, but it also kind of trickles into the rest of my life, which I'm very grateful for. I grew up in Texas. I'm 100% Indian. My parents are Punjabi. And so I had a very interesting upbringing as like the child of immigrant parents, sort of very typical in some ways, like kind of restrictive, but also pushed very hard to do well academically, given some freedoms, but also been pushing like, okay, you should probably like be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a dentist, be an engineer. Like those were sort of the options. And I was like, well, I guess out of all those, I'll be a doctor. Um, but really, I will say everything in my life, I have a hard time thinking very far ahead, but everything in my life happens in like in a couple of year cycles, and then it all seems to build perfectly onto the next. And when I like look back and people ask me like, how did I end up doing what I'm doing? And I'm like, well, I had no idea I'd be doing this, like 3, 4 years ago. And 3, 4 years ago, I had no idea I'd be there. And and back and back and back. And so that's why I'm also like, it's interesting when we think about our story because we have this viewpoint from now, but if you ask me like who are you and do it from the lens of a 12-year-old or a 20-year-old, like these would be vastly different answers, but I think they all carry such importance. And if I feel like you could equally ask me like who are you in like 20 years from now, and I would have a way more fluid answer, but like these are all relevant to me because what happens on these like this like timeline, it makes sense, but only from like certain perspectives. So yeah, I grew up in Texas, very Indian family and parents, but also like very culturally attuned to what was happening sort of around me with my peers and noticing a lot of differences just in the way we approached everything, family, work, food, like prayer, all of this. And I will say there was a lot of tension in that. It's never, it's not an easy thing to grow up sort of in the middle of two cultures, but there's like a lot of richness that comes from that. And I think it was also, I think sort of very multidimensionally, and I guess that was sort of my first exposure to that, like thinking through different lenses all the time, which, helped quite a bit. Again, like did you never know what these things will help with, but now looking back, I'm like, oh, I have such a different cultural lens. And so even now when I'm exposed to new cultures and learning like different traditions, whether it's like medicine work or something else, and just like healthcare, it's easier for me to like switch lens because I just had to do it from such a young age. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time in Texas, did medical school there, did college there, and then I was like, I got to get out of Texas. And then I really like found my home when I moved to New York to do my residency. And I loved New York. I'm like a very high energy person, and there it's like amplified. And so I was like for 4 years just like flying around, kind of not sleeping, working a lot, having a lot of fun, and really sort of getting my bearing on like, oh, like this is what I'm capable of, because it's residency is extremely challenging and sort of traumatic in its own way, and it like just shapes who you become as like a doctor and a person. And then I had a lot of like personal family tragedy stuff happening throughout basically my path to becoming a doctor, and sort of was I was exposed to a lot, but sort of protected in a way because they're like, oh, well, she's studying medicine and she's, and I didn't appreciate that. I didn't ask for that. I kind of only found out after the fact so many things. And they were like, well, you were studying it in school. And I'm like, that's not a reason to like not tell me things that are happening that are important in the family. And when I remember when I chose psychiatry, like my mom especially was not thrilled. She was like, why would you become a doctor, become a psychiatrist? She's like, that's not even a real doctor. And I was like, this is why people need psychiatry. Like, and I've always been a very different, like I'm very much more like therapy oriented and like root cause and developmental like patterning, and that is just what I always enjoyed doing, and like mindfulness, and I would just see glaringly like at me, and not just family, but where that doesn't go well. And I just again was like, I don't know how to change people's minds, especially when it's like family. But eventually, as things unfolded, right, if enough people in your family start struggling, people are like, oh, maybe you're onto something with like what you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, I think so, if you want to like actually listen and not yell at me. So there was a lot just on that path. And then also, as stuff was going on with family, I at some point realized like I needed more discipline. I don't know where, I mean, I know sort of where that came from, but I was being told a lot that I was very angry, and looking back, I can see that I was very smart. I mean, I am very smart, but I would like almost weaponize it. Like if you were dumb, I would like let you know. And I think it was just protective, like, because I wasn't very like I mean, I was kind of popular, but I wasn't like pretty, and I was like kind of good at sports. I was like kind of good at a lot of things, but I was super, super smart. And so, people were just like, yeah, don't debate her. Like she'll rip you apart. And it's not like I was wrong. I was right. I just like wasn't nice about it. And again, when you grow up in a family that prides being smart, I was like, well, great, this is easy. But then I think a lot of like cynicism and just, probably internalized feelings of like not being good enough and all this stuff would just come out in me, like not being nice to people who I thought were not very intelligent. And so anyways, at some point I was like, oh, people think I'm angry. I'm like, but I'm not really an angry person. And so I was like, I need to do something about this. And I was like, I should do yoga. I was like, I like yoga will help this. And I was like, I need more discipline. Like medicine's very disciplined, but I I need something else. Like that's outside of what I know, but also like I feel very connected to. And I had sort of practiced here and there, but I just remember in medical school, I was like, I'm just going to practice every day. And then I never stopped. Like I still practice every single day since like, I think it was like second year. And it totally like changed me like from the inside out. Like, and people sort of started noticing a few years in. And then when I went to residency in New York, I was like known as like the chill person who like never gets angry. And I was like, wow, that's nice. Like people think I'm chill here. And people like from 4 years ago thought I was just kind of this like cynical person. So I was learning a lot of just a lot through that practice. And it was very personal. Like I would go to studios, but it was really just like me on my mat. And I realized like that's how I approach a lot of things in life. And then I, it influenced the way I worked with patients and sort of was always kind of pushing people to be like, stop looking outside. Like, I promise you, there's certain practices and different things you can do that will help you sort of get to the root of like what your suffering or perceived problem is. And it's generally like the way people relate to themselves. And so, yeah, there was just a lot of like beautiful unfolding, and I'll pause because I feel like I'm just talking and talking and talking. But yeah, there's a lot to the
Yeah,
unraveling of me to this point. Yeah.
you're doing great. So I have one quick question. You said you weren't pretty. So when did you become pretty?
I guess I am very pretty now. I it's so funny because I never like thought of myself as like a pretty person. I don't know, maybe New York. I'm telling you, in New York I really blossomed. I think it was there.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
see this before and after photo.
Yeah, I mean, I had like braces in high school, and I don't know. I just wasn't like typical. Like, I grew up in like Dallas, right? Like, and I was not like a Dallas person, and I'm still not a Dallas person. But yeah, I
Okay,
think
sweet.
also like my whole family is really like beautiful people. Like, and we're just 100% Punjabi. If you know Punjabis, we're very like tall and strong and loud, and yeah, that's just kind of us. So I appreciate it now, but
Yeah. Well, I think you're pretty, but I didn't know you with braces. So I relate a lot to what you said about the using the intelligence as kind of a weapon, and maybe not a weapon, but as a way to like validate the self. So I resonate
Mhm.
with that, and I've gotten that before, where it's like, well, was she wrong when someone complained because I was mean? Well, was she wrong? No. Okay. But
Yeah.
yes, I
When I
agree. We
first met
definitely
you,
gave it credit.
that's how I would describe you. I was like, Melanie's so wise and smart. And then I remember you would always just be like, I read a lot of books. And I was like, and she's like funny. Like, I was like, she's like witty. And I was like, it's because she's so smart. That's why she's so witty.
Well, sure, and but I'm hopefully not mean like I used to
No,
be.
I
Still
never thought you
am.
were
I've
mean,
grown
but
up, but
like,
I've done a lot of yoga too. So I want to dig into that. What about the yoga do you think changed?
so many things. And yeah, I just like, I don't know. I'm feeling emotional today. I'm like, I could cry about yoga. I could cry about like my medical training. I could cry about a lot of things. But I like the way you show up on the mat is the way you show up to everything. And so how you speak to yourself, if you're trying hard, trying too hard, like not, not believing in yourself, or like I found so much like joy in like the delayed gratification of it, which, like everything in my life, I feel like was that like becoming a doctor takes forever. Psychiatry is like the most delayed gratification of all of the specialties. And so yoga, I was like, oh, it's going to take me like a year to learn this pose, and then there's going to be another pose and another pose. And it was very like workout and, asana based. It took me like a good 8 years to like actually get into the meditation portion of it. And I think, but that's part of the teaching, and I knew that. I was like, well, the whole point of yoga is to like, meditate. And I was like, I'll get to that. And then I also went through this phase where I was like, well, yoga is meditation and movement is meditation. And so it changed a lot of the way I thought about like, what does it mean to go inwards? And like, I was like pretty like addicted to working out. I wasn't eating well. Like I had an eating disorder. Like there was like lots of not good things happening. And I would practice a lot. And at the same time, it like you can't push yourself as much as like if I was like a runner, right? Like thank God I didn't get into that. So I would be like trying to push myself in yoga, but like you really can't. Like it's self-limiting and it's like confronting. And so I think over time it is like part of what kept me healthy, and it's why I like stuck to it so much. I think some part of me was like, this is like something that's going to sort of save you if you stick with it. And so there was that piece of it, like how you show up and just like showing up for yourself, and yeah, I enjoyed like the process. And then eventually it like led me to like looking more into the philosophy and the meditation piece. And and yeah, just I mean, it's also funny because I mean the roots are in India, and I went to India in the summer of my like last year of medical school and was like practicing on my like grandparents' roof, and like nobody in Punjab like does yoga, and they're like, "What is she doing?" And I'm like, "This is from your people." I was like, "This is your people." Like, and I was like, "Wow, so this is like not accepted everywhere the way that I think it is." But it's such a like the philosophy and then the practices that have come after, like they're so potent. You just have to, understand what they're doing. And then I was weaving a lot of that philosophy into my like therapy with people, and just, talking about pranayama, or again, just this like, how are you responding to like the internal world, and um, yeah, and just what does it mean to be still? What does it mean to like put in effort, and lots of things. And then when I did my teacher training, which was just last year, which I've been wanting to do forever and wouldn't make the time, and it's also interesting because I was like, well, I can't teach or I can't like really talk about it until I have like letters behind my name, because that's like how I've done everything in my life. But anytime I'd been practice, because I got pretty good at like the poses. And at that, by the time you get good at the poses, you're like, it's not about the poses. But like people are also like, wow, like do you teach? And I'm like, not yet, but like eventually I will. So it's very interesting. Like once you like kind of master something, you're like, well, that's not really what it's about. Like now I want to go on to the next thing. And so now I'm more interested in like the philosophy and meditation and like mantra, like really interested in like the sound and breath aspects of things. And yeah, I use it with patients and it's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. Tell me, how did you decide psychiatry? Or was it just that's what you wanted from the get-go, or how did you decide that?
No, no. So like I was saying, like everything kind of like I was unsure about medical school. I was like, maybe I'll do business because again, I was like really smart and I was like, it's like pretty easy to like manipulate people like to get it. This was my concept of business. I was like, oh, you just like manipulate people into like giving you money or like selling things. I was like, that seems easy. And I also remember being very much in like high school and early stage of college, like, should I use my like powers for like good or evil? Like I was very dramatic about these things. And I was like, you should be a doctor. You should not go into business. I was like, that's not gonna end well for you. I was like, you'll probably make a lot of money. But I was like, so very early on, I had this like strange moral compass, which, for better or worse, I'm like learning to let go of now. I'm like, there's no good and bad. But back then I was like, there's a right and a wrong thing to do. So I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor. And I also like, and I still sort of feel this. I'm like, if you have the ability to do something, and you like are interested in it, you should do it. I was like, I have like, I know how to work hard. I'm intelligent. Like, I like this stuff. Like, it'd be a waste for me to like be here and not do that, right? And I was very intrigued by this idea of like impacting people and helping people, and I didn't really know what that would look like. And I was like, well, you could do that doing anything, but it also was like a secure path. And I think I didn't realize like how much I needed a secure path, right? It's like 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency, and then like after residency, I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Like everything has been 4 years. So that was like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor. And then I get to medical school and it's like a lot of studying and like not what I thought it would be. And I was finding though, like there's so many like different ways you could volunteer and do different things. So I started working at this, like basically for people who like don't have health insurance or immigrants or in San Antonio. And I would like love going to those clinics. And I was like, oh, these people have like very simple, sometimes complex problems, but it's really like nobody's like listening to what's happening to them. Like they just have gone through all this trauma or like they can't afford food and all this stuff. And I was doing my master's in public health at the same time. So I was starting to see like there's like way more going on than just like the nerdy science, interesting stuff. And we have this like concept of like, oh, being a doctor, you must like know everything about the body and like can help people get better. And then it's like, that's not really what they're doing. They're like looking for problems, they're kind of creating problems, and then they're like patching you up. That's a lot of medicine. And I was like, this is not like what I really want to do, but I really enjoy like seeing people and connecting with them. And I was like, all of this is connected. I don't know why we're like studying cardiology and then studying the kidneys and then studying the brain and then, studying the gut. I was like, this seems very inefficient, but like, okay, I guess there's a method to this like madness. And really the method is to keep everybody like separate and like in their own little, floor of the hospital. But anyway, so when I finally third year did my psychiatry rotation, I was like, whoa, like this is so much better. We get to like sit and talk to people. I also don't have to like touch them as much. I was like not very into like all the physical stuff. And I was like, oh my God, like I don't really want to like, yeah, I don't know, do like a rectal exam on somebody. I was like, wow, we never have to do that in psychiatry. I was like, you're not even allowed to touch them. I was like, so yeah, I was like, well, this is great. I can just like talk to them. And and then I also was like, oh, yeah, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I can like help them with their blood pressure and their like diabetes and all this. Like this is like the primary care who has 10 minutes with them is not going to do it. And I remember when I was rotating through that clinic, they were always like, go faster, go faster. And I was like, I don't have time to like say 5 words to this person. So all of that, I was like, okay, I'm going to pick psychiatry. I had thought about neurology because again, like the brain science part was interesting. And my dad, who passed away, he had a very severe neurological condition. And so I think, like my mom really wanted me to pick that. And that's also why she was like, why did you pick psychiatry? And it was like a whole thing. And I was like, but this is like what I like and this is what I'm good at, because people would also just tell me things all the time. Like in the hospital rooms, like I'd be at the bedside with like family members, like in the like ICU, and I would just be there like asking a question or two, and then people would just start telling me like really relevant information. And then I would tell the attending and they're like, how did you find that out? I was like, I don't know, the mom told me. And they're like, they never told us that. I was like, yeah, probably because you like weren't listening to them, or like they didn't feel comfortable telling you because you're like in a rush or you're like super authoritarian. And so then I was like, people like telling me things. I like I like listening to stories. I like piecing everything together. And so that was my version of psychiatry, right? And I think other people go into it for other reasons, but And then when I was like, if I can, where then sort of the world opened because for whatever reason, at least when I was in school, like psychiatry was sort of looked down upon in a way, like, oh, if you can't get into other specialties, like do psychiatry or do emergency medicine, which to me makes no sense because those are like very challenging. But so people be like, wait, why? You're so smart. And I'm like, psychiatrists need to be smart too. And that like followed me to New York, like, because in residency, you have to rotate through internal medicine and neurology and like, and then Sinai is a great program. So I had my pick because there are good psychiatry programs, but it's such a weird like stigma. And they'd be like, you seem too smart to be a psychiatrist. I'm like, well, you're too mean to be a doctor. Like, why are you telling me this? Like, this doesn't, it's like everybody has their own. Anyway, so yeah, all that to say is psychiatry kind of like found me because I wasn't looking for it. And then I was still like very interested in like therapy and not, and most of our lectures are about like pharmaceuticals or just sort of the current theories on like schizophrenia or depression or, and like they were interesting to learn. What you learn is like how to not kill people and you learn like what dangerous things to look out for, which is really important, which is kind of my qualms with people who are, are like, they don't know what they don't know. And so when people are like, oh, doctors or DOs or NPs or PAs, and I'm like, we're all different. Like, and MDs and DOs have a lot more training, right? And so there's a little bit of a bias, but I think also going through the system, it's why I'm biased. And then having worked with other like sort of lower level degree wise people, I'm like, yeah, they don't really know. They think they know, but they haven't had the experience, right, of somebody like crashing in front of them and being like, what are you supposed to do, right? Or yeah, just again, also the time of it, right? Like it's 8 years of school and like you just learn a lot through that experience and time. Yeah, so anyways, I'm very grateful for my medical degree. Like again, like would I choose it now? Maybe not, probably not, right? I probably would have just done like a doctorate or something in psychology, but I'm so glad I have it because it gives a little more credibility and like there's things that I don't know how else I would have learned them. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I know where you ended up, but well, we could talk about what you actually do now, but I would be interested in what got you there. It sounds like you were always meant to think outside of the box, even when someone tells you that smart people don't do that. So I'm so glad that you were following your intuition because you're working with like cutting edge stuff now, I say.
Yeah, and it's interesting that's people say that, and or people are like, it's oh that's so new, or like that's like a new age thing, or like a modern thing, and I'm like, actually, like what we're doing is like going back to ancient, like ways of working with medicine or ancient technology, I guess you could call it. But yeah, so I feel like I'm just reversing course, and like again, I'm not trying to unlearn things, but I'm just like expanding my breadth of knowledge, right? Like Western medical system is one system of knowledge, just like Chinese medicine, just like Ayurveda, just like what you can learn from like South American tribes or like the Mazatecs or whatever, right? So there's just different systems of medicine. So I'm just more interested in like other systems that make more sense and also clinically what works. So when I graduated residency, I was like, they knew I wasn't gonna like stay in academia. I was like a bit of a rebel and would like, I don't know, I was like always just wanted to do therapy with people. And they're like, can you like do something else? And I'm like, no. And then so they were like, well, she's not gonna do research. She's not, and I just like I saw myself out, basically. But I did find one mentor who was not in the psychiatry department, this like wonderful Indian woman, because I was like, I really was like hungry to learn more about like functional medicine and like alternative ways of doing things. And I found this like brilliant Indian like internal medicine doctor, and she dealt with super super sick people like chronic HIV and like autoimmune stuff, and she like ran her department, and she was doing tons of this stuff. And so I worked with her for almost a year and like learned so much from her. And so she kind of like was like the permission slip in a way to be like, yeah, you can do this. She's like, I run this department. She's like, it's more work, and she's like, but it works and it's fulfilling and like people get better, and then and she's like, eventually you get enough respect and people are like, oh, you're not being crazy type of thing. So that was very helpful. Like I'm really grateful to her. And then when I like moved to Atlanta and got a job there, I was like, okay, I'll just like kind of start experimenting with my patients and, like not doing anything harmful. But I'm like, this is how you learn, right? You just try things with people and see what works. And of course, my patients were like blindsided because they're, it was insurance based. They were just expecting to come see like a whatever doctor. And I would just be like, spend time with them and be like, oh, like, tell me about your day and like, what did you eat? Like, what are your bowel movements like? Like, oh, like, what do you think about your dad's cancer? Like, why do you think he has cancer? And they'd be like, why are you asking me all these things? And I'm like, because this is important. And so I would start, and then when you ask these questions, people start reflecting. So half of it is just getting them to reflect, right? And so but again, it was a big experiment in a way because they were just expecting me to like write them a prescription and like send them on their way. So I learned, like, I really cut my teeth when it came to like practicing more holistically and just applying more of these like principles of like, how do you actually get somebody to change their nutrition or like move more or like whatever, right? Like not beat themselves up or like have more self-compassion and kind of like get them to understand what are they expecting from their medications, right? And like where else in life do they have these expectations? And a lot of like what are they projecting outside that's really coming from the inside. So that was always like the like, let's like try to turn this like ship around. Like I would say 80% of people were on board with it, and 20% of people are like, this is not what I signed up for. And I was like, yeah, I get it, like that's okay. But it was very validating. It was very like interesting. And I will say like a lot of stuff in my life was not going well, and then COVID hit, but like my work was very, very meaningful, and it was like it was going well, and I was doing things that like I felt passionate about and people were really like interested in. And then yeah, then it was COVID, and then I moved to Austin and decided I was gonna like sit with plant medicine for the first time. Unbeknownst to me, like I didn't know anything about it. Like I never even like really smoked weed. Like I was just this like not straight and narrow, but I was like, psychedelics, like we learned about those, right? Cause psychosis, blah blah blah. And I was at such like a low point. I was at this yoga retreat, and in the email, like when I had registered, they were like, "Oh, there's an option to do ayahuasca," and I was like, "Sure, like why not?" I was like, "That sounds like a good idea." And I'm like, "I'm a psychiatrist." I'm like, "That'll be fine." Like I know my brain. And I will say I am very fearless, and that never changed. I think that helped because I went down there and they're like, "You've never done anything?" I was like, "No." They're like, "Do you even know what this is?" I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to read a lot about it because I was like, I mean, I know it like changes like the way you think and perceive things." And I'm just also grateful that I like landed in the right place. I know there's lots of stories where people don't land in the right place, but I think obviously like that was where I was supposed to be, and it like set me off on this path. And then yeah, I had like incredible healing. I thought I was gonna process like my dad's loss and this like breakup, and it was all this like maternal fetal like it really helped with sort of I was like at a low point of my eating disorder, and it like that was like I see like day one of like actual like recovering from that because you just like see yourself in a totally different way. I was like never gonna talk to my mom again, and I came out of that of like okay, I guess I should talk to my mom. And so yeah, that was 5 years ago, and then I was also like all these revelations, and it was a lot of like stuff I remembered, and I like it was so funny because I used to like back when Facebook was more popular than Instagram, I would write these like quotes all the time, just like we're all just like floating around as like particles of light and like we're like reflecting off each other, blah blah blah. Or like I'd be like fire and wind and da, da, da. And people would be like, are you high? And I'm like, no, I just thought about this. And then now Facebook is like 10 years ago you said this, and after ayahuasca I was like, oh my God, I was like saying all this stuff to myself the whole time. I mean, no wonder people thought I was on drugs, but I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. So I think it was like that's what medicine does, right? It just brings out the truth more. But some part of me was always like, yeah, you kind of already know this. So it was like a really beautiful remembering. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to like bring this to people because to patients, because after doing 2 years of therapy with people and they're still stuck, I'm like, well, yeah, there's a difference between like knowing and then like embodying it and feeling it and being like, I feel safe enough now to actually like embrace this truth. And I was like, well, what can I do? And then I was like, ketamine, this is like the legal thing people are doing. And so then I got super involved in that world, and yeah, I did training and then started and was nervous to offer it to people because I treat it very ceremonially and was like kind of shocked that people were just giving it to people all the time. It was very strange to me. But I was like, well, it's like ayahuasca. In my mind, I'm like, if it's like so anything like ayahuasca, like how can you not have so much like reverence and preparation and all this for it? So that's the way I've always used it with people and like individually in groups. And then yeah, like that just kind of snowballed into other medicine work and it's sort of the stacking piece, right? Like the way like yoga influenced me and mindfulness and then like the holistic medicine and then like psychedelics has been the next layer. And so it all just like fits very nicely. Yeah. So that's how and now I do all sorts of things in my practice. And I would say not maybe like a third of my practice is ketamine, or they're working with other medicines and I'm providing like integration or preparation, but still like the majority is just like good old like lifestyle medicine and like energy medicine and that type of stuff.
I want to back up just to it was a little vague with the holistic stuff. What you learned from your mentor, what was that? What were those like tools? And then of those, what do you still use today? I'd be curious.
Yeah, so she was Indian as well, and I've always been like Ayurveda seems like a really good like medicinal system. Why don't we learn that? And so even like just being exposed to certain like adaptogens like ashwagandha or shatavari, and then understanding like more of the gut health type of things, like this is why you want to have like strong agni and like digest things, and she would tie it in very beautifully to like the science of like, well, yeah, like, and later on I came to understand this too, like, oh, this is why people shouldn't just like be on like proton pump inhibitors for their like acid reflux, because then you're not actually like digesting your foods because you don't have like pH dependent enzymes anymore. And I'm like, that's like in Ayurveda when we're like, keep the agni going, like you can't just shut the acid down. So it was like all these like parallels she was making with like medicine, like science medicine and that. And then she ran like an MBSR group, which is mindfulness based stress reduction. And I got to help with that, which is like this beautiful 8-week program. And like every big university, like Harvard and John Hopkins and like UCSF, they all have like online programs now, but it's like this very powerful 8-week container. And you go in there and you basically like teach and practice mindfulness with people. And it was like the results were like amazing. Like people were like going from chronic pain, taking opioids every day, to like, I don't have to take my opioids anymore. Like I was like, whoa, this is so interesting. So she just did a lot of stuff like that. And just the way she talked to people, you could like, her patients had so much respect for her. And these were like, not well off patients, sort of, just low income New York population. And just like the reverence they had for her. And I was like, yeah, because she built their trust, because she's listening to them and she's not just like, take these meds, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I would say like, again, it was like the permission to do those things. Like, oh, you can actually prescribe like supplements, and you can prescribe mindfulness, and then you can actually, she would like do breath work with them in sessions. And like, I do that with people all the, like, I started doing that almost immediately. I was like, oh, why don't we do that? And people appreciate it so much. So like, I'll do alternate nostril breathing, or like box breathing, or 4-7-8 breathing. I mean, there's so many different things you can do with people. And I was like, yeah, why aren't we doing it with them? Then they, again, like they have that safety in their system, like, oh, this is how you do it. And then they practice on their own, and then they'll come back and be like, oh, I did it, or I didn't do it. And so it was more of like the art of medicine, really. I was like more learning from her. And granted, I learned a lot of great things from like my psychotherapy mentors, but like when it came to just sort of the medicine part of it, I feel like she was very helpful. And then yeah, when I moved to Atlanta, I was like, I'm gonna just try other things with people, and like, what does magnesium do, and what if I check more labs, and like, oh my God, these people are like deficient in everything. No wonder like they think they have ADD, but actually they have no iron, or like they're super tired and getting sick all the time. It's like they don't have any vitamin D. It's like more Prozac is not going to fix this problem, sir. So it was just sort of like, to me, I'm like, it's so simple, and I'm like, I don't know why we don't get taught this stuff. And yeah, so there's just a lot there. And the nutrition stuff too is much more of like, it's really hard to change that habit. And with, I think a lot of what psychiatry is, and this is another reason I went into it, is like, if you want to make people healthier, like you have to get them to change their habits. And so you have to understand like, why are they doing this thing or not doing this thing? And sometimes it is like, okay, you can like read Atomic Habits. And sometimes it's like, do you like think you deserve to have these things? Do you think you have space for them? Are you like giving yourself permission? Are you like in a receiving mode? Are you in a fear mode, right? Like where along the way did you learn it's like not okay to take care of yourself? So that's like the deeper work I do with people. And so that was like the foundation that was being laid when I was like, what if like I don't worry about medications at this point and like see what else is going on?
Yeah. So your approach now is it part of your procedure to get labs, have them do labs, or is that just if they're willing to?
Yeah, I always try to get them to do it because it's helpful. And like my basic panel is only a little bit more than what the normal panel is. But yeah, I just like I'm not sure why we don't check these things. And I will say like 90% of people I check have like low vitamin D, and I'm like, what is this like epidemic? I don't know. It's very strange to me. Like, are we not absorbing it? Like everybody is low. Even they're like, I'm in the sun all the time. And I'm like, I think there's something else going on because everybody I check in the States is low. Yeah, and like B12, iron, like a full thyroid panel, especially women. So I do more like women's hormone stuff now too, because I was like, nobody is like talking to you about like your estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, especially like around perimenopause. And I'm like, it's not like you all of a sudden just like became depressed or like all of a sudden like nothing else changed and nothing else changed, right? But like your hormones are changing and like your brain's gonna work differently and like why don't you just try a little bit of progesterone and like wow, you feel like a whole new person. And I'm like sometimes you have to be a little reductionist and be like, you can't forget that we're also just like a bag of water with like chemicals and neurotransmitters like floating around. Like you have to kind of make sure that like soup is well balanced, right? And then like yeah, like your spark and your energy and like you has to come through that. But like yeah, you have to like take care of this vessel. And I definitely see people swing too far one way, right? Like they like then they only want it to be about their labs and they only want it to be about their supplements. And I'm like, okay, I gotta like autocorrect back. So it's like a whole blend of things. Um, but yeah, I just yeah, labs are interesting to do. Labs are interesting, but just people's perspective on their health and really like how are they moving about their day? Because I will ask people like, what do you do like in your day? And they'll immediately be like, well, I wake up and I do this and with my kids, and I'm like, whoa, 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 like what that like you, how do you wake up? Like, well, I wake up kind of anxious, and then I just like I start getting ready and doing this, and I'm like, okay, there's like problem number one. Like, why don't we like give you some space? Like, you have to if you like start again your day and world always outside, like how are you going to know anything that's going on inside? So then it's no surprise that at night you have insomnia because you just kind of ignored everything that was happening internally like from the get-go. So I'm really big on like morning routines and PM routines and like keeping your blood sugar stable. Like again, very simple things, but people need reminders. And I think, if I'm saying it's important and they feel it's important, and then it's more likely to happen because everybody knows these things. It's not like I mean, sometimes I'm giving people new information, but half the time it's not new, right? It's like what's the physical and the mental and like the emotional and the spiritual and like where's the gap, right? And most of the time it's people know it's not like a lack of knowledge, right? And people feel, so it's not like they're not believing it, they don't feel better. It's like something else is kind of getting in the way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I love that you take, what do you call it, holistic, or what do you call it?
Yeah,
Your,
I say integrative psychiatry, and I used that before. Like everybody was like integration, like psychedelics, and I'm like no, like because the word holistic, I don't know. I think I just saw that word used so often, and I was like, what does that mean? Da, da, da. And I was like, integrative makes more sense because I'm just like integrating all parts of self, and
yeah.
yeah, I just
But then
that's
also with the psychedelics, integration, not the same.
yes, yeah, not
Yeah.
the same.
I get how that can get confusing for people.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful approach because I don't know of any other psychiatrists that do that. Of course, I don't know a lot of psychiatrists, but
yeah, I don't know of that many either. I mean, there's a handful, but yeah, and I'm so used to doing things this way that I'm always like, whoa, like not everybody does things this way. So,
no, I
yeah.
love it. I think you're onto something there because we aren't just one kidney, right? It's holistic, it's spiritual. Do you
Yeah.
have with your patients who do end up using the ketamine or whatever psychedelics, do they add to their spiritual component of their life typically? I'm just curious.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very telling, right? Because it's like this usually like this big confrontation of like their fear of like what they're going to experience or find and like again meeting themselves. And a lot of my prep is like already getting people to like practice meeting themselves and practicing being still and sort of like learning to tolerate, more emotional intensity. And so, yeah, even the way I prepare people, I think, is for when they go into that, they're really like able to receive versus like resisting. Because a lot of times when people do any psychedelic medicine, like the first journey or two or five might be a lot of resistance. But if you like work with that ahead of time, like I think one of the most important questions, like when you're preparing, is like, what are you afraid of? Because if you can just start working with that immediately, then your journey will be much more like you'll be able to kind of go farther and deeper because you're not just fighting yourself or fighting fear or fighting whatever. So yeah, then people have like super spiritual, interesting experiences, and I'm like still shocked because ketamine's not my favorite medicine. I respect it a lot because of like what it does for people, but like my profound experiences are like with plant medicine because I'm just much more plant nature based. But I think I bring that element into like the room and in the way I prepare people. And so my patients have very like psilocybin like experiences. And I'm like, that happened on ketamine? Like, that's crazy. Like, like one of my patients was like, I think I met, like he was describing this like very Indian sounding like God with like arms. And I was like, I think you met Ganesha. And he was like, I think so. And so like I was like, wow, like people are just like tapping into these like with ketamine, like these like archetypal realms. And then, oftentimes it's just the very simple, but it's like, it's like it's never gonna be as like important and pure to that person as like when they feel it and it's coming out of their mouth, when they're just like, oh, like I just need to love myself more, or like, oh, it's really about love, right? And I'm like, yes. And it's like, I can't just tell you that, right? And so and so those types of experiences, I'm always like, good, like that is what you needed to experience, right? And like if it took all of this prep and taking ketamine, and now like how do we help you like remember and integrate that? But a lot of times people just need that like opening, right? And I think that's what the medicine, it gives you like an opening. And the opening is more powerful, right? If you are prepared and not as afraid, and sort of again have like the mental, emotional, spiritual bandwidth to like have the experience. So yeah, I find ketamine, when you sort of use it properly, can have like very profound experiences.
So tell me, like with the people who you work with, what type of people do you work with? And then like what does not just a session, but like a whole journey with you from beginning we meet to you're off on your own friend, like what does that kind of journey typically look like for people? And who are these people?
That's a really broad question, Melody. Sometimes I will say, like, I'm in private practice, and I think in some part of my mind, I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just see people who are kind of like, the worried well, and like, want to explore their mind, or, in whatever. And it's like, no, I get really, really sick people because they're like, nothing has worked, like, and we found you, and, you seem to be doing things differently. So I generally work with like really people who have like gone through a lot. And now that I work with psychedelics, a lot of people, even just sort of with psychedelic like injuries, let's say. And so depending, I guess I would split this up. If somebody is not coming to me for psychedelic work, because that's the majority of people I see, like my intake is very comprehensive. It's like an hour and a half, and that's already like after they've spent like an hour filling out this questionnaire. Because even that questionnaire, like I have a question on there that's like, do you like recognize an association between like your physical state and your emotions? And I'm just like shocked that so many people are like, no. And I'm like, well, that's good information for me. Like that's a place to start. So like those types of questions like help me start to understand how people are like mentalizing things. And so that's, I start there. And then I basically, when I meet somebody, I'm like seeing and connecting a lot of dots based on like, oh, this happened in their childhood, or like this is what they're telling me about what they're eating, or this is what they're sort of feel like is a big problem, and this is where they're disconnected. Like I'm also like where they connected, where they disconnected in their life and in themselves. And then sort of after that, I kind of have like a gestalt of like, I think this might work for you, this might work for you. And then I give them like a big, like 2-page document that's like supplements, resources for like other providers, like very specific like meditations or things that I'm like, when I'm hearing them talk about something, I'm like, oh, like maybe they would benefit from like fire gazing meditation, or maybe they would benefit from like this very specific body worker who does stuff with like intergenerational trauma and like the shoulders or something. So I'm like listening to all this, and then I'm like talking about meds and supplements, and like sounds like you have a magnesium deficiency, or it sounds like your adrenals are burned out, like we should do a salivary cortisol. And so I'm putting all this together, and then I give them this big document, and I'm like, okay, you can't do all of it at once, but this is going to be like our working document of what we want to try. And then they come back, and then we're like, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and we go from there. And then I kind of start learning more about like where is it easier for them to put an effort, where is it harder, and like what are the blocks that are coming up, because then you learn so much more from like what they're resisting, right? And then I'm also very much like highlighting strengths, because I think people kind of get down on themselves. And one of my questions is like, name 5 words to describe yourself. And like 90% of the time people write really lovely things about themselves, and I'm always like, this is who you are, this is who you're telling me who you are, right? So like let's remember that, right? Even if you're just like, my family hates me and like I can't find a partner, I'm like, but you think you're like beautiful and like eloquent and all these things. And so it's like a mix of things. And then yeah, we meet and we talk, and I do a lot of somatic work with people too. That's sort of a newer thing that I was like trying to get people sort of without psychedelics to be like, basically just like somatic self-inquiry, like where do you feel that in your body, and what's the emotions and stories and all these things associated with it, but being really like present, because people immediately like want to go to their head, right? They're like, I feel like a tightness in my chest, and they're like, I think it's because of this. I'm like, no thinking. Like, what is the tightness telling you, right? Or what happens if you send breath there, or like what is like an association coming up with that? And yeah, people tell me the wildest things, and I'm like, I could never come up with that. Like that answer came from you. So I do a lot of that type of work with people as well, which is, even if they have their own therapist, it's very like complementary. And then I have some patients who are like my therapy patients, and we like really go deep when we're meeting more
Beautiful.
frequently. Yeah.
So if someone listening new to all this, what is like the first thing that you've given lots of great tools. What's like the first thing that you would recommend people look into and try?
If for what?
Well, if they're dysregulated or unhappy or just yeah.
Nature. Yeah. Go outside or even inside, like with a plant, like sit with a plant, sit with a tree, touch a tree, talk to a tree, like I do this every day. Or whatever element speaks to you, like nature is so regulating, like literally, like there's like basically like plant pheromones, if you want to call them, that like come out of the plants. It's why we like feel really good when we're like walking in like a forest, right? There's like a real chemical piece to it. Like our body is like is supposed to sync up with nature on so many levels, right? Water, plants, fire, all that. So being out in nature is like one of the most regulating things that we can do, and we're so disconnected from that, right? Like even wearing shoes, like that's really unnatural. Like we're kind of cutting off our own nervous system regulation by doing that. So I'm always telling people to like put their feet in the grass, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Take your shoes off, like go outside, put your feet on the grass, on the ground." And they're like, "Oh." They're like, "Wow, that feels great." And I'm like, "Yes, that's like naturally how we're supposed to be feeling. Like we're supposed to discharge all that energy down." And so, yeah, I would say that's like an easy, free thing you can do anywhere, anytime. Is like connect to some sort of plant or element.
Beautiful. Yes. So where can people, like, I know you have a website. There, when you Google you, there's
What
like
do you
all the
Google
stuff
me?
comes up.
My
Where
website
is
is long. It's Dr. Sandhu Integrative Psychiatry. And then my Instagram is justbjs.be.
perfect? And they can just reach out to you and find out more about you and
Yeah.
connect. And
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, I'm in Mexico City, so I'm starting to do some more interesting plant medicine work down here, but in the States, everything is very above ground. So I work with ketamine and then just, regular anything anybody needs from like a integrative psychiatry perspective if they're wanting to look at sort of a new perspective on themselves and really connect more inwards to understand what's going on.
the most of it's online, I imagine. Then if they do choose to do ketamine, where do you do that?
In Austin. Yeah, so I come back to Austin quarterly, and that kind of is going back to if you're doing a lot of prep and integration, like you need less medicine. And so my patients don't do that many ketamine sessions at all. I've been through periods where I was in Austin and people would be doing weekly, but I don't know, I found that spacing them out works pretty well for people. So yeah.
Can they come to
Yeah.
Mexico City? Do you have a spot down there to host people?
They can come, yeah. I'm actually working with this beautiful, beautiful retreat center in this group called Sacred Council, and they're in Valle de Bravo. And so we just actually finished an ayahuasca retreat 2 weeks ago, which was really lovely. And yeah, that's open to people, so they can look at sacredcouncil.com. And there's another retreat in April, so I'll be helping with that one. So yeah, there's lots of ways to kind of connect and reach out, and I'm always happy to like collaborate and listen to people, and yeah, we're all here to help each other. So
Yes. If there's anything I missed asking you and you want to share?
no, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm very happy to connect and share, and yeah,
I learned so much more about you and your practice
thanks.
that I didn't know. So impressive. I'm excited.
Oh, thanks, Melanie.
Yeah,
All
you're
right,
welcome. Alrighty. Well, you have a lovely day.
thanks, bye.
This has been a call to healing. I hope Jasdeep's perspective on somatic inquiry, nature's regulation, and the power of inward connection offered something meaningful for your own journey. To learn more about her integrative psychiatry practice, visit her website. It's drsandhuintegrativepsychiatry.com and find the pathways that resonate with you. A Call to Healing is supported by Senavita, helping practitioners spend more time in service and less time in the back office.